What I'm going to do now, the second installment of Why All Roads Lead to LaRouche's Four Laws. I did the first installment 2 weeks ago. And current events going on in the U.S., especially around the sanctions bill that was passed in both houses, requires that I go through again this idea so we can have a better sense of the deeper nature of the wellsprings of the current insurrection going on against the elected President of the United States. This insurrection is coming from a deeper well. So I'll start by reading you from the paper, The Lost Art of Capital Budget. I'm going to read you a few paragraphs as a starting introduction. It's the first 4 paragraphs. Since that notorious uproar of 1968, which erupted in Europe as in the Americas, the Mayfly passions of the upper 20 percentile of today's reigning white-collar, quote, baby boomer generation, are frequently expressed as a loss of desire for the practice of long-term marriages, a loss of caring for the prospects for younger generations, and a loss of any interest in investments in the future of the physical economy of other nations, or even their own. Hence, since that generation dominates our Senate and also much of our House of Representatives, our Congress had, in the main, lately misplaced the pivotal conception on which the future existence of our nation now depends, the concept of capital budget. This must now be changed. What has been lost is a sense of the meaning of indispensable capital investment in the physical conditions of progress. It means a loss of the meaning of the investment required not only to rescue the United States of America, but to secure the civilized future existence of the world as a whole. Some among you are perhaps angered by my saying this. Think carefully. Witness the ration of members of U.S. Congress who count every budgeted dollar of public expenditure as outlays which must be balanced by current tax receipts. From the standpoint of any competent economist, that policy is, in effect, the practice of ruinous, sheer, inhuman recklessness in economic policy and practice. The change in state of mind respecting economic policy, which had become widespread in the Congress during the course of the recent 4 decades, has become a radical change, a radical downturn from the level of competence of the founders of our Federal Republic, a downturn of more than a quarter of a century in what performance had formerly suggested might be the apparent functional intelligence quotient of a majority of those leaders in senior positions. This was in effect shaped to a large degree by the stratum from among the typical university-oriented baby boomers of 1968, which had launched a virtual state of class warfare, a warfare of white-collar against blue-collar. They were more and more against farmers, industrial operatives, and physical science-based professionals. Many among them were even against anything that represented technological progress in production and infrastructure. That cultural paradigm shift, expressed by the 68ers, became the cultural matrix which has dominated the downward shift in values over more than a quarter century to date. So that's the 4-paragraph introduction there. So I will now delve into the theological and philosophical issues involved in LaRouche's 4 laws. And LaRouche's 4 laws are based on the discovery of the laws of physical economics based upon the work of Riemann and Cantor, and are informed by this discovery that LaRouche made in the early 1950s. Now, up until the late 1700s, there was no such thing as science separated from philosophy or theology. It was believed, regardless of your position, that they were not divorced. There was one universe. What was true in one area had to be true in another. And I'll give you two quick examples. The first is Kepler. Kepler asked in his New Astronomy, what kind of God would create a solar system where the center of the solar system is an imaginary point? All three competing explanations, Ptolemy's, Copernicus's, and Tycho Brahe's, were consistent with the data of observation. However, they each had to rely on placing the center of the solar system either off the Earth, or with epicycles, or away from the sun. To Kepler, and he makes this clear in the New Astronomy, a God that would do that wouldn't be much of a God. And God would create a solar system that would have one physical causes, which would be susceptible to discovery, and whose laws could become knowable to humanity. From this, he came up with the conclusion that the sun had to be the physical center and the cause of the motions of the planet, not just being a body around which the planets orbit. The sun was a physical cause. From this, he discovered the elliptical motion and the laws of planetary motion and gravity. This is before Newton. Now, if you were to talk this way about the nature of God and man today as a scientist, you might be asked to see a psychiatrist, or perhaps go to a mental institution. Another example is Einstein. Einstein could not imagine a God who would create a universe where the speed of light would not be constant to all observers, regardless of their relative speeds to each other. Because light is the basis of communication, otherwise the events in the world would not be orderly. It would be chaotic. Whether you believe that human beings were born with a blank slate, or by which through the senses came images, recollection of images, thoughts, memory, and finally concepts in the sense of Aristotle or people like Locke, or whether you believe that human beings were born with pre-existing concepts that they used to organize experience. In both cases, you exude a sense that reason exists in some form for human beings to understand the universe. In this debate between these two, which dominated the 17th and 18th centuries, on the one side you had Francis Bacon, Locke, Newton, Hume, and later on, and on the other side you had Leibniz, and of course before that Kepler, that along came the towering figure of philosophy for the last 200 years, Immanuel Kant. And he arrived into his concepts at the end of the 1700s, at the end of the 18th century. Now Kant sought to resolve this by saying that you are born with categories without which perception cannot be understood. But without perception, the categories would not exist or could not be activated. And so this seemed to resolve the issue between the two. Then what he did is assert that though the relationship of categories and sense experience, the mind can only know what can be known by these. That is, these categories and sense perception together can only know, and the mind can only know through that medium. But this is not the universe. Rather, reality as reality, which he called noumena, is outside of these categories and the senses, and cannot be known by the mind, or cannot be known by reason. So you have phenomena, which is what you can know through the use of your mind or reason in the context of your sense experience and these pre-existing categories. But you can't know the noumena, which is the reality as reality. So now you have reality as reality and reality as we know. Okay, now, this is the real world as it is, cannot be known. Thus, the real world cannot be known. In this respect, issues of theology or even philosophy cannot be known. And religion is off the hook because it is no longer needs to be informed by science. And science is no longer subject to being coherent with any ideas in theology or philosophy. Science becomes basically experiments and experimental knowledge. But it doesn't have to be coherent with theology or philosophy. And this issue has dominated Western thought ever since. Now, 100 years later, you had Nietzsche, and in between you had Hegel and Savigny, and in between Kant and Nietzsche, you had the separation of the natural sciences from the humanities in all of the academic spheres. So you had a separation of humanities, which would be languages, music, history, philosophy, culture, and then natural sciences. These were different things. They had no relationship to one another. Now, why am I bringing this up? Okay, hold on. Now, this later led to further extremes after Nietzsche into the 20th and 21st centuries, and what people are calling now the postmodernist movement, or the postmodernist rebellion against the tyranny of reason, which is ascribed to the post-Renaissance modern world. So the people who coined postmodernism are claiming that you had a medieval period, you had the modern period, and you have the postmodern period. Now, the people who are now going around talking about postmodernism, they don't understand that there were two different traditions. And they tend to think that Francis Bacon is the basis of modernism. And they don't really have a concept of the role of Leibniz. Okay? And so they tend to lump these all together as the modern post-Renaissance world. And then postmodernism is an attack on that. And Kant is sort of the branch point between the two. He's in both worlds, according to these people. Now, so why am I bringing this up? Because until LaRouche, who spent a lot of his youth trying to both understand Kant, and he spent an incredible amount of time on Kant, decades, and his predecessor, Leibniz, the Kantian strain in Western philosophy has indeed dominated modern thought and divorced science from the earlier tradition of Leibniz, which is, he's really not understood because he's writing in a different language. He's mixing God into science, and that's kind of like known. Now, what Larousse essentially discovered with the help of Riemann and Cantor is that the universe organized by principles that are discoverable, like Kepler and Einstein, and when applied to economics and culture, there is a change in the universe. Man alters the universe, which increases the potential population density of the species. Therefore, mankind can know what Kant calls the unknowable noumena. But the unknowable noumena that man discovers is not through the senses, and is not through the categories that come with being human, and the combination of the senses and those categories. It's outside of that, but human beings have the capacity under certain circumstances and with certain rigor to actually discover new physical principles in the universe, of how the universe is organized. And therefore, they're discovering reality as it really is, because if that did not exist, they could not use those principles to dramatically change their relationship in economics, and their relationship to the environment, their relationship to the planet, and so forth. So, when mankind does discover what had previously been unknowable principles that are not directly accessible to both the categories that Kant talks about and the experience or the senses, those changes, those discoveries caused dramatic changes in the relationships of humanity to the physical universe, etc. Now, on the other hand, the European oligarchy that consolidated power over the planet with the British East India Company by the end of the Napoleonic Wars has been the principal promoter of the increasingly more radical post-Kantian philosophers and their revolutions. Hegel, Marx is in that tradition to some degree. Nietzsche, Savigny, and then later you get in the 20th century Heidegger. And then after Heidegger you get people like Sartre, Foucault, Derrida, Rorty. And today these later are of course called postmodernists. And became very big and were latched onto and promoted very big by the 68er revolution generation. And they have become hegemonic in the academic discipline of anthropology, sociology, psychology, and philosophy, which are not the natural sciences, and are at the core of the cultural aspect of what we see today. There's a soft aspect and a hard aspect. Now, why wouldn't this European oligarchy wish to promote these movements? Because they wish to escape being accountable to any lawfulness, any morality, and most of all, they want to assert that humans have no basis for knowing truth, and that reason has does not really exist. Now, prior to postmodernism, or prior to the current period, you had, before Kant, you had a certain, to some degree, a mixture of scientific thinking and traditional theology and traditional philosophical traditions. You had it during the Renaissance. You had it during the Arab Renaissance, and you also had it in some of the Jewish Renaissances that went on in the time of Alexander the Great. A lot of the best aspects of Jewish culture comes out of the period of the Hellenic period. It doesn't come from Judaism directly, it comes from the Hellenic period. And there was a certain degree in which under certain periods in China, for instance, in the period of Confucianism, there was a certain coherence between a lot of the development that took place in China in the better periods of the first half of the dynastic, like when the Han Dynasty, the first half of the Han Dynasty, the first half of the Sung Dynasty, the first half of the Ming Dynasty, a lot of the improvements, a lot of the development, a lot of the technology developed in that period. And you had, okay. So now, as the British East India Company was coming into prominence, its backers commissioned a historian by the name of Edward Gibbon to write a very exhaustive book with many, many volumes called The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. This is the most comprehensive study of the Roman Empire that's ever been done. And his main thesis is that Rome collapsed because it was being challenged by Christianity and its belief in one God, man in the image of God, that the universe is knowable and truth exists and is the basis of morality. And it's this movement of Christianity which threatened the Roman Empire. And finally the Roman Empire had to co-opt it. But nonetheless, he claims that this was the cause of the collapse of the Roman Empire. Now, similar concepts exist in Judaism and Islam and the Confucian philosophical tradition in China. However, these religious and philosophical traditions have taken a profound beating in the modern period, a profound crushing beating, and in the hands of Western philosophy. And this profound beating also includes this idea that truth is relegated to the experimental sciences, and everything else is a matter of personal preference, of belief, of opinion, and so forth. And so, essentially, and I'll get to that in a second. Okay. So, and essentially, it's a matter of irrational belief. What you believe, while you believe in God, fine, that's fine for you. Okay, that's a matter of irrational belief. It's not a matter of truth. Or you think in philosophy this, well, that's nice. That's the way it is. There's no truthfulness to it. It's a matter of, and what you get is a matter of feeling, irrational feeling, and irrational beliefs. In other words, there is no, the religion is no longer, the theology within a religion does not have to be, it's based on belief and feeling, not based on truth. Okay. But LaRouche's concept of physical economics as proof of man being a second creator, created in the image of the Creator, as being expressed in scientific and technological products, is helping now in this part of the 21st century and in the latter part of the 20th century, has helping to spark a revival of traditional values and religion, not fearful of progress, but embracing progress, not as a threat or an evil, but as the essence of the affirmation of man's true spiritual nature. You see this in China with the revival of Confucianism. You see it in the Russian experience right now within the Russian Orthodox Church. You've actually had people connected to the Russian Orthodox Church talk about LaRouche's ideas as an affirmation of a Christian theology, even though LaRouche's ideas do not mention. And so there is this beginning to revival of traditional values, but not as modernism or postmodernism, but as more of a renaissance of a humanist paradigm. Now, from there, let's look at the current situation. We have two civilizational threatening issues facing humanity, and have had for some time. The first is the directionality of the transatlantic financial and political system towards a nuclear war, to win a nuclear war against Russia and China. And then you also have the directionality, which is of a financial system that cannot ultimately survive and create a financial collapse. Although Trump has made some headway in stabilizing the nuclear situation, despite the assault on stopping that stabilization by the sanctions bill, it does not solve the problem of the financial crisis. And so you have the situation in Italy, where the banks are being claimed to be insolvent, and that, you know, somewhere on the order of $100 billion has to be to recapitalize them. And you have essentially the issue is coming up for the oligarchy. The oligarchy wants to crush the One Belt, One Road. They want to crush Russia and China. And if they can't do it with a nuclear war, they want to do it with a financial collapse. And so this is where we're at. Now, the risky thing about a financial collapse for the oligarchy is that when there's a financial collapse, if there's any sovereignty within a nation, that nation can act to create a new financial system. It has the power to do that if it's sovereign, or it has any sovereignty to it. And you're already seeing France starting to move in that direction. You see something motion towards that in Italy. You see a faint motion in Germany. So bringing about a financial collapse could actually result in wiping out the financial system, but also wiping out the oligarchy altogether through Glass-Steagall and all the financial instruments that are involved. So this is a very, so how do you engineer a collapse in such a way that you don't end up wiping yourself out? Or let's put it this way, you don't want a resolution of the financial collapse to be in the form of Glass-Steagall or LaRouche's 4 laws. You don't want that, and that's what you're going to get under certain conditions if there's some sovereignty left in any of these nations and if they have the wherewithal to do this. So the question is one of sovereignty. Now, in the current situation in the United States, you have no institutional force that will work with Trump for any good, because he's not seen as one of them. He's also seen by many who might be indifferent as dead meat. And why? Because he represents the basket of deplorables whom the 68ers long ago wrote off as losers, who were once the middle class and the working class. So the mindset of the elite of the 68ers is these people are worthless. I mean, Hillary said it. She called them a basket of deplorables. They're worthless. And they are the ones who got them elected. So the basket of deplorables, which is their view of these people that got them elected, they have no legitimacy. They shouldn't even be voting. Why are we allowing them to vote? They're not informed. They think, some of them think that we didn't even go to the moon. Some of them think that the enemy is the Mexican immigrants. Some of them are just ignorant. They're a bunch of ignorant peasants, or worse, or just stupid white people, or whatever. It doesn't matter what they think of them. The point is, they are citizens, and they voted in the election, and they voted for Trump. Trump has no legitimacy. These people are not legitimate. Are we going to tolerate having Trump as president, representing these foul deplorables? No, we're not going to tolerate that. Why should we? I mean, I'm getting to the core of the problem. Why should we tolerate them? So, and look at these tweets. They're from chimpanzees. But then all those people are chimpanzees anyhow. And we got a bunch of chimpanzees supporting Trump. Anyhow, I'll stop there on that one. So, so the Russia thing is only a small part of the coup which is in progress. The parties don't support Trump either, except out of some fear that they won't get elected. So now Trump is scrambling on the ropes. He is on the ropes. Don't kid yourself. He's on the ropes. And it's not even a question of whether he figures out how to deal with the sanctions thing, which I'll go into. No, even if he's on the ropes. And whether he realized this or not, okay, when he took office, he's on the ropes. And being the kind of person that he is, he's not going to give up. And what other recourse does he have? He only has one recourse: to create an army of these deplorables to wield against the institutions. He has no other recourse. There is no other recourse for him. And that gets into a very dangerous realm. Okay? Now, but what is this army of deplorables? What are these people? They're not really deplorables, by the way. I talk to them a lot. I've been talking to them a lot. So they're not really deplorables. They're actually people that they want to do good things. And that's why they're stupid, of course. They want to do good things.
That's why.
And
yeah.
I've worked in the factory for 25 years. I know who these guys are.
Yeah. And
They're pissed off.
So it's really, on a deeper level, there's a cultural war going on. it's on a deeper level. It's not even a policy issue. It's a cultural war issue. And I have been, in the last 2 weeks or so, last 3 weeks, I've probably been in the 2 to 3 days a week. I've been going to different parts of the suburban area of Puget Sound, not Seattle proper, but the Puget Sound area. And I've been somewhat shocked by the amount of people. We put up these huge saying, "Stop here, stop the coup against Trump," and so forth. And all these people are coming up to talk to us, and they're from all different angles. They're libertarians, they're fanatic end-timers, they're preppers, they're meekly speaking little people that normally don't speak up, and they say, "Well, I don't like the way he talks, but you know, he is the president." And then you have enraged blue-collar Democrats, the ones that get me are the enraged blue-collar Democrats, and coming up, and they just want to stick it to the Democratic Party. They hate the Republican Party, but they want to stick it to the Democratic Party because they hate them both, and on and on and on. You have all these kind of people, but what's emerging is a sentiment that what's uniting them is not the issues, but the personality of the president. That's what's uniting them. This is what I'm picking up. Okay, it's not we agree on this issue or we agree on that issue, or we agree on immigrants, we don't agree on immigrants, we agree on all this. It's the personality of the president that is starting to coalesce this army. I could be wrong, but that's my sense. That's my sense of being in the street. Now,
that he's a fighter.
That he's a fighter. He has a lot. He's got a stiff resistance against the people that run the country, and he's our guy. He's going to fight for it. He's going to fight. We're his army. That's what we're picking up. That's what I'm picking up in the street. Okay, and that's where the Twitter comes in. That's the 30+ million people that follow his Twitter. And what I've also discovered is that when they read his Twitter account, they don't just say, "Oh, that's what Trump said." No, they go in and they go to all of the websites, they go check out everything, and then they come up. So I'm trying to explain what's going on, and they're explaining to me what's going on. And these are just people off the street, and they're explaining to me, "Yeah, but you didn't see this and this, you didn't see that, and you didn't follow that," and so now the other thing I picked up is that a lot of these people have no idea who LaRouche is. Then we have another group that come up, a smaller group that I said, "Oh, LaRouche. Oh, I used to know you guys in the 90s. I used to know you guys in the 80s. I used to know you guys. Yeah. You guys are in this. Oh, okay, yeah. Now, but all these people come up, they don't know anything about LaRouche. And I'm saying, why? LaRouche has been out there for all this time. How come they don't know anything about LaRouche? Never heard the name, because it hasn't been in the media for a while. And then I realized these are new people. These are people just coming in and just being activated. They're just coming to life. They're starting to become political for the first time probably in their life. And if they're younger, this is the first time they're becoming political. So this is also happening. Okay, so let's get to the question of the vote in Congress on the sanctions. Now I checked up on the actual law, and this was a Yale law professor discussing the sanctions bill, okay. And I'm a little confused, maybe it'll be straightened out. But according to this Yale professor, the sanctions bill puts these sanctions, codifies these sanctions and that the president has to come to the Congress with a report on why he wants to remove the sanctions, or that he's going to remove the sanctions. And then the Congress has 30 days to have hearings. The president can't do anything for the 30 days. If the Congress, then after the 30 days, the president can remove the sanctions. But this brings it into the media, this brings it into the whole, thing like that. And then, in the bill, there's an unconstitutional part of it, which means that before the 30 days run out, the Congress can pass a law going against the sanctions that he wants to remove.
Is that Russia?
And that's the unconstitutional part. Huh?
Against Russia.
Law against his action.
Against his proposed action that is going to go into effect at the end of 30 days. So then he has to veto that. If he vetoes that, that's another 12 days. So really it's about a 52-day period that if he decides on day one to submit the report to say that he's going to remove these sanctions, there's roughly a 52-day period before he can.
In this section, you're talking about existing sanctions.
Yes.
So that doesn't apply to the new sections Congress has approved.
Yes, it applies to those two.
Current and future.
And future.
But it has to be approved first.
No. No. If the Congress approves of the removal of sanctions, then yes, he can remove the sanctions then. But if the Congress doesn't approve, he can still, according to this law professor, according to the way the law is written, he can still remove the sanctions. But he can't do it in the 30 days.
But you can't remove sanctions that don't exist.
Right.
It has to exist first.
Yes, it has to exist
So
first.
it will not exist until the president signs it in a law. Before that, it doesn't exist. So this new sanctions here hasn't been approved by the
Exactly.
president yet.
But I'm saying if he does not approve the bill and it goes back and they override the veto, that's when it becomes, the new sanctions become,
Yeah, okay.
okay.
Then
So
after
I'm
that,
saying,
we can go through the removal of the
But-
sanctions.
yeah, he can still remove the sanctions even if he signs it and even if he doesn't sign it and it goes through.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. And if he vetoes it, they can override the veto. So, and they have a veto-proof, okay, thing. But the point I'm getting at is it forces him to go through all this media and everything else and, you know, and so forth. Now, so why did they do this? Why did only 2 senators and only 2 congressmen vote against the sanction bill? And this is really perturbing to me.
You mean 2 Republicans?
Huh?
2 Republicans.
2 Republicans, but that's not the point. The point is why so few people were willing why were they willing to do this? Because they're not with the president. But deep down inside, none of these politicians want to face their culpability in the policies that have been rejected by those who voted for Trump. And the reality and the destructiveness of those policies. Or they don't want to face their accommodation to those policies. And they have no love for the deplorables or these people. And they fear the deplorables who see through their moral corruption, even though they are deplorables.
Can you repeat that?
Okay.
First line.
Okay. Because deep down inside, these elected officials, these politicians, do not want to face their culpability in the policies that are destroying humanity, that are destroying the Middle East, that are destroying Africa, that are destroying the world. They don't want to face their culpability. And if they're more decent, they don't want to face their personal accommodation. It's a deep, deep self-hatred that you're dealing with in the elected officials, or worse. And therefore, it isn't even a question of whether Trump has put forward positive policies. It's that Trump has indicated that he intends to change all these policies, whether he does or not. And secondly, the people who voted for him are not the people who have any respect for their sophistry or for their personas or for their professional personas. These people have no respect for these people. So basically, you're in a situation where you are scorned, and you don't want to face why you are being scorned. You don't want to deal with that. And so this goes back to the 68ers and the class warfare against the working class. And so you're dealing with that kind of problem. So we are in a very unique situation, a very explosive revolutionary situation where Trump is indeed dead meat unless he unleashes the army of Trumpers now forming in reaction to the assault on him. Okay. Now, we are running our operation on a number of different flanks. One of the current flanks, the short-term flank that we're running, is the massive dissemination of the memo provided by the Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, VIPS. Now, they were able to examine the Guccifer thing and discover the frauds in the Guccifer thing and discover that basically Assange got the information at point A in early June, and then later June the Guccifer thing came out to preempt Assange, and it's very clear that that's where the Russian thing was put in there. And when the Clinton people found out that somebody had leaked the stuff to Assange, to WikiLeaks, they went berserk. And so we have forensic evidence from the analysis by these professionals of the existing situation. And we want to get that out because we want that pursued. Because if it is pursued, it's not in the media is not covering this, but if it's pursued by the Trump administration and by people like Nunes or Grassley, it will have a big impact because it goes directly to the heart of the question. And Ray McGovern, one of the leading people in this, in an interview with us, which we put on the talks, the webcast on Friday, you know, it's basically indicating that this was and then this whole was indicating that this was the panic that went on in the Clinton camp, in the Obama camp, and that Debbie Wasserman and her IT guy who just got arrested and all of this stuff is all somehow connected to all of this. So it's not clear how this is all going to work out. But we want to get that out on a mass scale. And so this is part of what we're doing. The second thing we're doing in the field, and we're trying to get as many squads out into the street as possible, this is very, very important, is to intersect the discussion that's going on in the population among themselves over policy. Because they don't really understand Glass-Steagall, these people. They don't really understand the four laws. They don't really understand the economics. Some of them do. But we want to get that process of discussion going on in those layers because it's very important that they start to think about what Trump is going to have to do to deal with the economic collapse. So, so that's very important. Now, so this is what we're doing. And we will have new initiatives as they come up. We will have new interventions as they come up into the situation. And what we did on the VIPS dossier is, on Thursday, we went, I think it was Thursday or Friday, we sent our team into Congress and we went to 100 congressional offices and talked to the staffers about this. So we actually got that into Congress. Now, but to give you a sense of our interventions, earlier last week, I think it was the early part of the week, the Democratic Party leadership in the Congress, led by Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, had a press conference, which was in Maryland, Berryville, Maryland, and the Steny Hoyer set it up. He's from Maryland, and they had a bunch of congressmen there, and including Elizabeth Warren. He's a real dingbat, by the way, as far as I'm concerned. Everybody likes her because she's from Glass-Steagall, but she's a dingbat. sorry. And anyhow, we were there, and we had our people there, and I watched it, and I put this in the promo. Chuck Schumer said that, you know, it wasn't the Russians that caused them to lose the election. It was the fact that they weren't listening to the working class. He actually said that, in effect. So that means that there's a shift going on there towards, and the reason the shift is going on is because the local Democratic Party machines are just going absolutely ape, saying, what are you guys doing? This is killing us. All this crap about Russia, 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 you know, it's not working here. These people want help. You know, they don't want to hear that stuff. They want to know what you're going to do. So in answer to that, they did a cosmetic thing with Pelosi, you know, doing her thing and Schumer doing his thing, and you know, they're going to do, you know, these various different things that were very minor cosmetic things. And then the second question, or the third question, came from Anita Gallagher, one of our activists, who immediately launched into the financial crisis and the need for Glass-Steagall, you know, that's the real issue, that there's no credit in the real economy, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, Schumer said, well, we're going to be talking about that. Yeah, he backed off. Can we have a question from the press? But the whole place just the fizzle went out of the, I said the fizzle went out of the, you know, out of what they were doing. So this is we're just not going to give up. We're just going to keep going at it. Now, I want to finish with an addendum on postmodernism, just so that's affecting our youth. And I want to just go into this a little bit, and it's not, I'm not going to go into long detail, but basically, what you end up having is this idea that reason is the manner by which white, male, dead European men, to me, right? I'm sorry. White, male, dead Europeans, or white male, white, dead European males, white, dead European males, have enslaved you, right? That's the concept, and you see this emerging in the feminist movement. Right? And not so much in the question of equality, which is not the issue. It's where they say women have been dominated by men, but also dominated by men who use reason. And women have feelings and are intuitive. So this is the whole thing that they were pushing back when I was a teenager and in my early adulthood. I was dating some women and I was getting a good dose of it about 50 years ago, 45 years ago. Okay, so that's part of it. So that's one aspect. So there's a postmodernist aspect to feminism, and basically what it boils down to is, since you cannot know reality, all you know is what you know, and what shapes what you know is the following four categories: your class. Right? Are you poor, middle class, rich? Your race, right? Which race were you in, black or white? Or yellow, maybe. I don't know if they include yellow in that. That's a different category. Okay. And ethnicity and sex. So what's happened, right, is you are these things. You didn't, and you have no way of being universal. And if you say you're universal, or you say you're human and you encompass everything, then you're bullshit, right? This is not possible. You know, when King says, you know, all human beings are the same, you know, we are created by our Creator with unalienable rights in the Constitution. Equal. The concept of equal is a concept of a universal quality of humanity that does not exist. This does not exist. This is dead European male rational behavior. Now, the way this works is all the horrors of the world that have been occurred under the oligarchy, which are real, get connected to this concept. So they control the connection of hell being created to the very thing that could liberate you from the hell. So that's the method. That's what postmodernist philosophy can do. And then you have the anti-postmodernist crowd coming in, but their whole thing is individuality. You know, it's straight Adam Smith. Individuality, you know, greed, you know, the Enlightenment, and capitalism. So that's there. So this is left, which in a sense is what you can sort of say, but it's really not true. Because the earlier left, the earlier communists, the earlier socialists were very rational. So this is not left in the sense of in that sense. But this is the way they describe it, left, and this is conservative. So this is, so their concept is not our concept at all. The concept of the people that are running the anti-postmodernist campaigns are not our concepts per se. But they have useful understanding of this, so that I don't have to dig through everything for 20 years. I can get to their stuff and their descriptions of Kant and Heidegger and all this, and check those out to see how they work, and I can save a lot of time. But their view of humanity is probably better than this. This is worse, even though this claims that this is the cause of all the problems, which in a sense it is. But it doesn't solve any problem. So this is now in this schema, you have no way to resolve anything through dialogue. You have no way to resolve anything through reason, because reason is defective. Truth doesn't exist. The only truth that there is that there are the oppressors and the oppressed. Because that's the only way you resolve anything is through power, through violence. Okay, so violence is the resolution, and you either identify with the oppressor or you identify with the groups that have been oppressed. So if you're not from the oppressor class, then you identify with the oppressed. So you identify with African Americans, even though you're white, because they've been oppressed. But you look at the world not as they would see the world, but as you might imagine that you would see them as somebody who's oppressed. And the African Americans who reject this, hate this stuff, and the African Americans who think they can use some of this to get ahead, they try to use to get ahead, and other African Americans who've lost their way can use it as an excuse. So you get it being used in different ways by different people. And then you get African American intellectuals who are younger intellectuals who've been totally, brought into this, and that's how they do things, So this whole thing is it's a pile because it disrupts. Now, so since sex is very important in the sense of identity. You're a man or a woman, but then you have these other possibilities. And of course, these things are not things these things are given by genetics, or they're fixed. There's no such thing as, so I heard Orrin Hatch, the leading congressman leading senator from Utah, the guy's a Mormon, right? He's a Mormon, he should know better, right? Say you know, how bad it is that Trump has, you know, said something about the transsexuals in the military, but that's not the point. The point is that he said they're born that way. Even he, a Mormon, has assimilated a world, partly assimilated this postmodernist idea that you're born that way, or you come from the class, or you come from the sex. That's who you are. And don't try to be anything else, because that's who you are. So this whole thing is really, really a problem, and it's taken over the psychology. It's taken over. It's been very long term. It's taken over. So now you have, now the deplorables hate this stuff. You know, they hate all of this because it goes totally against their basic working class mentality. You know, living a productive life, getting a decent job, working and having a family. This goes totally against all of this. So you have this postmodernist thing is really bad. So anyhow, this is what we're dealing with.